Hello, I'm Nathan Ezra Jackson, and I'm a writer.
I'm Sheena McGregor, and I'm a writer, and we are here at Edinburgh International Book Festival with Sarah Rubin and Katherine Woodfine.
Hello, could you each tell us a wee bit about your book?
Would you like to go first?
I can go first.
Okay.
So my books are the Sinclair's Mysteries, which are basically historical mysteries set in an Edwardian department store. So they've kind of been described as a little bit of Nancy Drew meets Mr. Selfridge. So they're about a group of friends who have to solve all kinds of crimes and mysterious goings on in this environment of a very glamorous, kind of glitzy Edwardian shop.
And I write the Alice Jones Mysteries, and they are a contemporary mystery about an American girl, you can tell the accent, in Philadelphia who is very logical and very math literate. And so she uses her logic to solve crimes in her hometown. And her dad's a crime reporter, so she gets to solve some of the bigger crimes, not just the stuff that's going on at school.
So Sarah, what is it about Alice, and Katherine, what is it about Sophie and Lil that make them such good sleuths?
Okay, well, Alice is a good sleuth because she is very methodical and very logical, and so she likes to look at each of the clues like they're a piece to an equation and add them all up, and when she has all of the pieces of her puzzle or her equation, then she solves for X, which is how she solves the mystery. So that's sort of what helps her have the edge over the other people trying to solve crimes.
I think at the beginning of my series, Sophie and Lil actually don't know that much about solving mysteries. They're kind of put into a situation where they have to become detectives. And a lot of what makes them good at doing that is that they're kind of behind the scenes in the world of the shop. So they can maybe go to some of the places and see some of the things that other people can't. But really the series is all about them learning how to be really great detectives and obviously working as a team, the two of them and their friends, to solve mysteries together, because I think that's a really great thing about mystery stories is, you know, whether it's the Famous Five or Scooby-Doo or whatever, there's always this idea of the group of characters who might all have different strengths, but together they become like the crack mystery solving squad.
So, why did both of you decide to focus on crime and mystery stories as a writer? What's their appeal to you?
That's a good question. There's something really fun about a mystery, and I think one of the things I loved when I was reading mysteries growing up is that as a reader you can be involved in the story in a way that you can be involved in almost any book you read, but with the mystery you can really be the detective and try and beat them to the solution. And I loved trying to do that. I was never very good at it, and so when it came time to write the mystery, it was my chance to sort of be the one who solved it first. And so I wanted to give it a try and hopefully write something that someone else would read and try and solve before my detective.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I love that thing of, it's a bit like when you're watching a murder mystery on the TV, and it's really fun if you can guess who the murderer is before, you know, you find out on the programme. But yeah, I think mysteries are great because they are such page turners. You know, you've really got that drive as a reader to find out what happened, who did it, how did the crime happen, and sort of work all of that out. And you know, obviously there's also that sort of lovely tradition of mystery writing, I think, that we all really enjoy, whether it's sort of Agatha Christie or Nancy Drew. And so I think it really takes us back into that sort of cosy world of the kind of classic mystery story that's really fun to explore.
What do you think are the differences and similarities between writing crime and mystery stories for middle grade readers compared to teenage and adult novels?
That's a really interesting question, and actually I would say that I'm not sure there are that many differences. I think that perhaps in the past there's been this notion that you know, there shouldn't be sort of crimes or murders or dangerous things happening in books for children, but I don't think that's the case anymore. I think people kind of understand that actually, you know, children can kind of get their heads around those kind of challenging things just as much as adults.
For me, I think with the subject matter, I agree that really, especially now, you see a lot of darker middle grade mysteries, but I think it has to do with the detective.
Yes.
That's where I find the difference. It's who your protagonist is, and you know, for the middle grade one, you probably want someone who the reader can feel like they're solving the crime along with, someone they can identify with. So your character who's solving the crime might be a little bit younger and have a slightly different outlook on life and have different concerns than the detective in an older mystery would have. So like Alice is concerned with her family structure and her sister and all of that stuff, and Sophie's trying to find her place in the world in a way.
Absolutely. And also I think something I'm often conscious of is that I don't want the story to be completely impossible for the reader to solve. Like, it's nice if you feel that as you're reading that you're picking up on clues and you're maybe guessing what's going to happen, or maybe you're not quite sure, but you don't want it to be sort of so confusing and sort of ambiguous that there's no possibility of solving the mystery, because that just seems mean. Like, where's the fun in that? You need to give your reader like a chance to
play fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was your favourite book when you were 8 or 9 years old?
Oh, it's a very good question.
I
think I usually say it's so hard because there's like millions. I mean, I was a very big reader when I was growing up, and I know you were too. But the book that I usually come back to is The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, which is obviously set in the Edwardian era. It's written during the Edwardian era. So that was one of the books that really got me interested in that time in history, which is when the Sinclair's mysteries are set. But it's also just such a wonderful, magical story about the power of nature and about friendship, and just a really delightful kind of world to escape into.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I would just read anything. I was really into Agatha Christie. I absolutely loved Agatha Christie books, and Nancy Drew, and I would read all of those. But I'd have to say, interestingly enough, my favorite books were fantasy books. And I've never been able to write a successful fantasy, maybe because I read too much and loved like the classics so much, and everything I try and write never adds up to The Lord of the Rings. But yeah, I loved epic fantasy growing up, and I would have to say The Lord of the Rings was my favorite, and I still reread it all the time.
Can't go wrong.
No.
What's the most important thing about writing for middle grade readership for you?
The most important thing, I think the most important thing about writing for middle grade is that idea that your readers are sort of on the start of a kind of a reading journey with you, and the experience that they might have reading your book will affect how they feel about reading as they get older. So I kind of really always want to make my books as engaging as possible, as exciting as possible, as magical as possible, I guess, to steal your word, in order to really sort of pass on that kind of passion and love for reading that I had when I was that age. And I really want that my readers can have that too, if you see what I mean.
I do. I think the advice I always give, and I think it's for actually writing for any age, but for me it's middle grade, is to try and think back to the age you identify with. And for me, it's that sort of 11, 12-year-old self that I can remember what it was like, and I can really vividly remember some things that happened, the friendships I made, and also the things that I found really unjust. I can remember that really strongly, that sense of why don't grown-ups do the right thing all the time?
The adult world, like full of these weird, annoying,
And so trying to think back and remembering what it was like to experience things, and trying to write with that in mind, not with my adult perspectives and not with like all of the stuff I've learned that has to happen as a grown-up, but trying to write from the perspective of what it was like to be that age. And I think that's the most important thing for me, is to try and honor the reader, I suppose.
Yeah, that's great advice, definitely.
When you are crafting a mystery or crime plot, what is your method? Do you work it out all in advance before you write any of the story, or do you try and write the story as it comes to you and let it surprise you?
I definitely had to work it out beforehand. So for me, the most important thing was actually to plan the crime first. So I had to figure out what the crime was going to be, because you want your crime to be exciting. You don't want it to be a boring pedestrian crime. You need a little bit of glamour in there. And then you have to sort of figure out how the crime was committed, so that you know what clues get left behind, and you know what your detective is going to find, and you know who the bad guy is to a certain extent. And then I tried to write it from there. But that being said, and doing all that planning, I still wrote myself in knots, and so a lot of making the crime story work is coming back and editing it, and sneaking back into your early chapters and adding the clues you realize you need to drop when you get to the end, and you're like, oh gosh, how did they figure that out? So it's a bit of both.
That definitely resonates with me as well. Like, I think it is, I have heard some people do it, but I think it is very hard to write a mystery or a crime story without an element of planning and working out what's going to happen beforehand. And for me, what I will often do is get out a load of post-it notes and sort of like write down sort of key events of the story, or when I want certain clues to be revealed, and then kind of move them around so that I can get a structure that I feel like works for me. But equally, then often things surprise you, or they might change as you go along. So I think an element of planning, but then some openness to the fact that things don't always quite pan out the way that you might have expected.
So, what is your top piece of advice for somebody who wants to create a sleuth or detective character?
So detective character, I think when I talk to people about writing detectives, I talk about giving a character, and the same for most characters, you want to give them strengths and weaknesses to keep them interesting. And I like for detectives, I like for them to have a special skill. So like Alice's special skill is her ability with maths. And I talk about Sherlock Holmes' special skill is his sort of encyclopedic knowledge. And Miss Marple's special skill is her, vast history of watching village life and knowing all about sort of human frailties. And I think that giving them a special skill gives your character a different perspective, and then you can sort of design your crime around them and make sure that they've got a leg up, because as a writer you're behind the curtain and you're sort of cheating things to help your character, which is totally fair.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I would also say, which is sort of universal writing advice really, but to read as much as you can, and if you want to write mysteries, then read lots and lots of mysteries and crimes, because there really is no better way to learn how to construct a story than to read loads of great mysteries, whether that's classic Victorian crime stories, or whether it's Agatha Christie, or whether it's children's mysteries, or whatever it is that appeals to you, because really all of that reading, like immersing yourself in other people's stories, is, I think, better than anything else what teaches you how to do it yourself.
And also, if you're thinking about writing, when you do that reading, it's hard to turn off your enjoyment part of your brain, and don't totally turn off your enjoyment part of your brain, but think critically about sort of what the author is doing, and when you do see them drop a clue, or even reread a mystery, because if you know what the solution is and you reread, you can sort of see how they've dropped the clues in, and that helps.
How does it work? Which bits are the exciting bits, like the pace, the tension, all of those things, definitely.
What is your top piece of advice for a writer planning the perfect crime or making the most compelling mystery?
Put yourself in your villain's shoes and really try and imagine how you would get away with it, and be devious. It's the only time we writers get to be completely devious and have a criminal streak. And also, I think you want to think about just the type of crime, like what would be exciting to sort of solve. So like, the Clockwork Sparrow is such I wanted to own it when I read about it. It sounds so beautiful. So of course you understand why someone wants to steal it. And like in the first Alice Jones book, it's a man disappearing from a locked room, but he's working on an invisibility suit. So you're sort of adding a little glamour to the crime itself.
Or in the second Alice Jones, like the idea of like a ghost behind the scenes of the theatre. I mean, who doesn't want to know about that? Yeah,
haunted theatres. You gotta love haunted theatres. So things that you're excited about, those are always the things that are the most fun to write about. And I think those are the things that when you do write about them, you'll connect with all the other people who are also excited about the things that get you excited.
Each of you are writing a series of books focused on crime and mystery. Can you give us some clues about what's coming next?
Yes, we can. So the next book in the Sinclair's Mysteries series is coming out in October, and it's called The Midnight Peacock. And this is kind of, it's set in the winter, and it's kind of a Christmassy mystery. So we get to see Sinclair's department store at Christmas and all of the kind of festive goings on. And really with this book, I had a lot of fun thinking about all of my favourite kind of Christmassy mystery and crime stories, but also some other kind of classic things that we see in Edwardian crime, like the Country House mystery, which is a bit of a classic, and sort of putting them all in there. So yeah, it should be lots of fun.
It's fantastic. Well, actually, Alice has done her 2 adventures, and so she is not coming back for the time being. Although I know someday I would love to do more. Right now she's off to math camp, and she's going to focus her studies on math, and hopefully nothing will happen while she's at camp.
Well, watch this space, I say.
I know. But hopefully I'm working on something new, which is also slightly mystery and a little bit more magical. So a little bit of a magical mystery, but I can't say much about it because sadly, if I talk too much about my writing in progress, it sort of slips away. So keep it close to the chest.
Thank you very much for speaking with us.